I had barely stepped out of my truck when the dust from the long dirt road was still settling around me. It felt good to be back at my grandpa's ranch, a place full of memories, quiet sunsets, and the kind of peace you can't find in the city. But before I could even take in the view, trouble showed up faster than I expected. Out of nowhere, this woman stormed up the driveway, acting like she owned the place. She didn't just walk. She marched, eyes sharp, voice raised, and the kind of energy that told me this was going to be more than a simple misunderstanding. She introduced herself like she was some authority, claiming the ranch was part of her community rules. I stood there in disbelief. This was my family's land, passed down for generations, and now some stranger was trying to tell me it wasn't mine? The more she talked, the more obvious it became. She was one of those HOA types, someone who thought she could control everything around her, even property that didn't belong to her. What she didn't know, though, was that I wasn't just any visitor showing up at my grandpa's ranch. I wasn't just a grandson coming back home. I was the mayor of this town, and the ranch she was pointing at wasn't just a piece of land. It was my legacy. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but the fire in her eyes told me she wasn't here to joke. She was serious, and she wasn't backing down. The tension hung heavy in the air as we stood facing each other. She thought she had the upper hand, but little did she know, the truth was about to flip everything upside down. She stood there, arms crossed, demanding to see the paperwork, as if she had any authority on my family's land. Her confidence didn't waver, not even for a second, and that told me one thing. This wasn't the first time she had pulled a stunt like this. The way she barked orders, pointing toward the barn, and even the old oak tree by the fence line, made it sound like she had already claimed the place in her mind. I could see she believed every word she was saying, and that made the whole encounter even stranger. I wanted to ask her who exactly she thought she was, but part of me held back, just observing. She was dressed sharply, like someone who belonged at a board meeting, not stomping across a dusty ranch. Her tone carried that mix of entitlement and authority I'd seen before from HOA types, the kind of people who think a title gives them the right to control everyone else. But this wasn't a subdivision with matching mailboxes and streetlights. This was my grandfather's ranch, sitting on land older than any HOA she could dream up. Still, the more she spoke, the more I realized she wasn't just bluffing. She kept referring to documents and agreements I had never heard of, insisting that the property had been annexed into some kind of homeowners association years ago. That didn't make sense. My grandpa was stubborn, the kind of man who fought hard to keep his independence. He never would have signed away control of his land. And yet, the way she said it, calm, rehearsed, almost smug, made me wonder if there was more to the story than I knew. Her eyes locked onto mine, as if daring me to challenge her claim. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, the silence of the ranch broken only by her sharp words. Something told me this was only the beginning, and the truth she was holding back was bigger than either of us was letting on. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is my grandpa's ranch," I told her, but she just smirked, like she had heard that excuse 100 times before. Her attitude wasn't just about land, it was about power. She acted like the ranch was already under her rule, and I could feel her waiting for me to slip up. What unsettled me most was how certain she was, like she had a plan already in motion, one I wasn't aware of yet. As she kept pressing, I couldn't help but think about my grandfather. He had passed down stories about neighbors trying to buy him out, developers trying to take pieces of the land, and even county officials pushing for zoning changes. He never gave in. So how was this woman standing here claiming legal rights? It gnawed at me that maybe there were details my grandpa hadn't shared, papers tucked away in an old drawer, something that could explain why she thought she had a case. Meanwhile, I noticed a pickup parked across the road. Inside was a man leaning against the hood, arms folded, watching us closely. He didn't step in, but his presence made it clear this woman wasn't acting alone. That added another layer of tension. Was this just her personal power trip, or was there a larger group trying to pressure me into something? The land itself seemed to listen as the standoff grew heavier. The old barn creaked in the wind, the cattle shifted in the pasture, and I felt the weight of history pressing against the present. This wasn't just about boundaries, it was about legacy, control, and the truth behind why she had shown up the moment I arrived. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the real fight was only beginning. The woman's voice grew sharper, each word cutting into the quiet of the ranch like a blade. She walked closer to the porch, pointing toward the front door, as if she had every right to step inside. My patience was running thin, but I knew one wrong move could give her exactly what she wanted. I stood my ground, refusing to let her cross that line, but the intensity in her eyes told me she was ready to push further. The man by the pickup shifted, finally stepping closer, his boots crunching on the gravel. He didn't say a word, but his presence carried weight. It was clear he wasn't just there for show. He was her backup, maybe even proof that she wasn't operating alone. My gut told me this wasn't some random neighbor. It was organized. Someone had fed her information about my family's land, maybe even about me. The idea that strangers had been studying our ranch without us knowing sent a chill through me. I thought about my grandfather again, how fiercely he guarded this land. I could almost hear his voice in my head, reminding me that the ranch wasn't just property. It was our roots, our story, and the backbone of a community. Losing it would mean losing more than acres of dirt and pasture. It would mean giving up everything my family had fought to protect. The woman suddenly pulled out a folder, waving papers that she claimed were proof of her rights. The pages flapped in the breeze as she held them like a weapon. My heart pounded, not because I believed her, but because I realized how far she was willing to go. Every step, every word, every silence was pushing us closer to a breaking point, and I knew the next moment could change everything. The folder snapped open in her hands, papers fluttering as the wind caught their edges. She held them out with a smug look, daring me to take them. I didn't move. Something about the way she clutched those documents felt staged, too prepared, like she had been waiting for this exact moment. Then, almost on cue, the man by the truck pulled out his phone and started recording, angling the camera so it caught me, the ranch, and her in the same frame. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a setup. I realized quickly that whatever she was planning wasn't meant to stay between the three of us. She wanted evidence, footage, maybe even a narrative she could twist against me. And if she managed to frame this as some sort of public dispute, my position as mayor could make me the perfect target. The thought hit hard. This wasn't about just taking land. It was about control, leverage, and reputation. Before I could respond, she said something that froze me in place. She claimed she had already been in contact with town officials who supposedly backed her claims. That caught me off guard. If there were people inside the system willing to side with her, then the conflict wasn't just at the gate of my ranch, it was running through the very community I was elected to serve. I felt the tension press even tighter as she waved the papers again, her voice rising with confidence. The man filming didn't flinch, steady as if he'd done this before. My pulse hammered as I realized this wasn't a random power grab. This was coordinated. And if I didn't uncover who was pulling the strings, everything, my family's ranch, my legacy, and even my standing as mayor, was at risk. I finally reached for the folder, my hands steady even though my chest felt tight. She smirked, sure that she had me cornered, but the moment my eyes scanned the papers, everything shifted. The documents weren't legal deeds or official agreements. They were copies of old zoning proposals, and signed and never approved. They were nothing more than drafts, paperwork with no power. My grandfather must have fought these years ago and won, which meant her entire claim was built on smoke. I lifted my head slowly, locking eyes with her. "These don't prove anything," I said firmly, holding the papers up for the camera to see. "This ranch was never part of your HOA. It never will be." Her face faltered, the confidence draining as the man with the phone lowered it, unsure of what he was even capturing now. But before I could breathe, she revealed one last card. In a low voice, she said she knew about a deal my grandfather had kept hidden, a side agreement that tied the ranch to a land trust with strings attached. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if there really was something I hadn't uncovered? She leaned closer, whispering that people in town were already waiting for me to make the wrong move. I squared my shoulders, the weight of being mayor and grandson crashing together. Then we'll bring it all into the open, I said, loud enough for the camera to catch. Every record, every deal, every name. Her eyes narrowed, realizing her bluff had backfired. The man shut off his phone, tension thick as the silence returned. The immediate fight was over, but her warning lingered like a shadow. I had won this battle, but the twist was clear. Someone bigger was still moving the pieces behind her. The woman stood there in silence for a long moment, clutching her empty folder as though it could still give her authority. The man by the truck finally shook his head and muttered something under his breath before climbing back into the driver's seat. She hesitated, then turned away, her heels kicking up little clouds of dust as she stormed off. The sound of her car fading down the road felt like the first deep breath I'd taken since arriving. I stayed on the porch, looking out at the ranch. The barn, the fields, the weathered fences, it all felt heavier now, but in a way that reminded me of its worth. My grandfather had carried the burden of protecting this place, and now it was my turn. Whatever she had hinted about secret agreements or hidden deals might still be out there, but I knew one thing for certain. The ranch was mine to defend, and I wasn't going to let anyone rewrite that history. Later that evening, I pulled out some of my grandpa's old boxes stored in the study. Faded papers, notes scribbled in his handwriting, even letters to town officials were stacked neatly. They told the story of a man who never backed down, who fought to keep this land free from outside control. Reading through them, I realized he hadn't just left me property, he had left me proof, wisdom, and the strength to carry on his fight. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt the ranch settle into quiet again. The conflict wasn't gone, but I understood it now. People like her might come and go, but the roots of this land ran deeper than any false claim. And that was the lesson I was meant to carry forward. Protect your legacy, stand your ground, and never let someone else write your story.